I asked Brian, I said, do you want me to do your official bio? Do you want me to read all of this? Or do you want me just to tell people how much I like you? He said, yeah, that'd be good. So I learned a lot about Brian last night at dinner. I mean, we all know, if we've read anything at all, that he's consulted for more than 1,000 companies, addressed more than 5 million people and 5,000 talks. He told me last night he'd been to 180-something countries. He's spoken in 80-something countries, I think, maybe more than that now. Let's see, how many books? My goodness. Oh, he's traveled and worked in 122 countries on 6 continents. Get this, speaks 4 languages. Most important, happily married, has 4 children, and one of them is with him right now, David. You may not know this, but I posted on Facebook last night, just had dinner with a wonderful man and his wonderful son. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to take some notes, and I'm ready to learn from the man, Brian Tریسی. What about you? Yeah? Let's bring him on up. Give a big warm inner circle. Phenomenal, better than phenomenal. BTPOTT, welcome to Brian Tریسی. Brian Tریسی, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Howard. Thank you. Now, I first met Zig Ziglar when I was 30 years old. I went to a big motivational seminar in the biggest hall in Edmonton, Alberta. And I went and listened to him. It was the first time I'd ever heard a motivational speaker was Zig Ziglar. And I actually spoke to him there. And I remember that, wow, this guy is so enormous in the world of motivational speaking. And then I read his books. And then some years later, I became a speaker myself. And then some years after that, Zig and I met again, and by this time I was speaking, and so we began doing seminars together all over the country. And I would do the morning, he would do the afternoon. Sometimes we'd have somebody who would speak for 45 or 60 minutes, but we went around the country doing seminars together, sort of like a dog and pony act. I don't know who was the dog or who was the pony. But Zig was the great one. Remember, he told that wonderful story about young person, you're going to be a great one. Wonderful story. Well, he was the great one. He had an enormous impact on us. He's an incredible man. So I'm very delighted to be here with you and with the people in the Ziglar organization. I learned so much. With regard to my gimping around this, I call this the Night of the Walking Dead. I know you probably don't watch that. Does anybody watch the Night of the Walking Dead? Well, that's how I feel. 50 years ago, I'm 73 now, 50 years ago, I was climbing a mountain in Cape Town called Table Mountain. And it's very famous. As a matter of fact, I ran into a physiotherapist the other day, and he was telling me about my leg. I said, I fell off Table Mountain. He said, oh yeah, the back part, where you go down so that you don't have to pay for the gondola. How did you know that? Well, he and his father climbed that mountain. He's much younger than me. And what happened was, I didn't have the money, and so to save money, what I did is I hiked up and then I hiked down. And hiking it down, it's a long hike, and by this time you're tired. It's several hours. So I decided I would take the shortcut. And the shortcut, I still remember, was going down the mountain like this, and it started getting steeper and steeper, and actually it curved in. And I kept grabbing and grasping and everything else, and finally I just slipped off and dropped about 10 or 15 feet and twisted my ankle. And so I was able to limp down to the bottom and go to a hospital or clinic, and they bandaged it up with tensor bandages, and it kept hurting like blazes. So I went to another clinic a week later, and they said, big problem here. He said, what happened was you twisted your ankle. It was a sprain. It was almost a break, and you should have had a cast on your leg, not a bandage. And so it's going to come back to bite you later on in life. That was 50 years ago. And this March, I was walking in Milan, and my legs started to hurt like blazes. By the next day, I could barely walk. I started going to doctors and clinics and got cortisone and everything else. Finally got back and I found that this foot, this ankle had seized up. It's called degenerative arthritis, and it freezes. So the only way I can do anything with it now is to have surgery. So I'm having surgery on June 19th. I wanted to be sure to be here, so I kept punting on the surgery. So June 19th, I'll have surgery. They'll go in and they do some kind of miracle. All the pain is gone. They're going to put in an artificial ankle, and I'll be back to normal again by the end of this summer. So I just want you to know that. Thank you. But I still get up every morning and say, thank you, God, for all my blessings. Because no matter how bad we have it, it's still vastly better than most people in the world. Well, thank you very much for being here. I came from a poor family, as Howard did. Howard was a waiter, and I was a dishwasher in a restaurant. And so he was busy getting the dishes dirty, and I was busy washing them. And it was like a circle. And I've been astonished, I read the stories and biographies and autobiographies of wealthy people who started with little or nothing. It's amazing how many of them started off as laborers. They started off as dishwashers. They started off as gardeners. When I grew up, I didn't graduate from high school. I didn't have a great childhood. And so I washed dishes, and when I lost that job, I got a job washing cars in a car lot. And when I lost that job, I got a job washing floors for the janitorial service. I actually thought washing was in my future. And I told that to my wife, which I never should have, because all our lives, she's given me things to wash. She says she doesn't want me to lose my edge. So we had 4 little babies and grandchildren and houses and homes and cars and everything else, so I've kept my edge. Anyway, so I traveled. I lived in a car, an old car. When it was cold outside, I slept next to the car. When it was warm, next to the road. I worked on farms and ranches. I dug wells. That's where you start at ground level and you work down rather than up. And when you succeed, you fail, because when you find water, they fire you. It's not a great incentive system. It looks like water will go slow. We needed another couple of days' work. And so I would dig wells and I would work on farms and ranches. When I was 23 years old, I was working on a farm and sleeping on the hay in the farmer's barn and getting up when it was pitch black, 5 o'clock in the morning, with the other itinerant farm workers. An itinerant farm worker is one who works during the harvest. And go out and work all day long to bring in the crop before the first frost. And when the harvest was over, my job was gone. And when I could no longer get a job in laboring, I got a job in sales, like many of you. And we started selling stuff in order to stay alive. And I think it's the best thing that ever happened to me. But for 6 months, I spun my wheels. I got no training at all. I got a knick-knack, which I went from door to door selling, office to office in the daytime, and then homes and apartments in the evenings up till 9 o'clock at night. I would work 10, 12 hours a day, and sometimes I'd work all day long going from place to place and not even make a sale in 12 hours. And I had a little rooming house, and I would have to make a sale to pay for my rooming house and to eat. And I'll tell you, starvation is a real good motivator for making a sale. Well, let me think it over. Think it over? You must be kidding. I've got to eat today. And I got paid my commission when I made a sale. I had to come back with the cash, and I got my commission. I did this for 6 months, and so it was just touch and go. And I say that selling without having any sales training is the best weight loss program in our society, because I lost about 10, 12 pounds. Just dropped, the weight just fell off. It's quite amazing. And one day I noticed that there was a guy in our office, and there's a reason for this story. And his name was Pete. And Pete was about 5 years older than I was. And when you're 22, 23, which I was at that time, being 28 is almost like being Methuselah, like being a grandfather. And he was earning 10 times as much as I was. And he wasn't even working very hard. He'd roll in around 9:30 in the morning, go out, make a couple of sales, come back, have lunch with other people or with other customers, make a couple of sales in the afternoon, and then he'd go out in the evenings, and he always made enough money so he could go out with girls, and he could go out to restaurants and nightclubs. I mean, it was just a great life. And everybody looked up to Pete because he always had a pocket full of money. And so I said to him one day, I did something that changed my life. I said, Pete, what are you doing differently from me? How come you're making so many sales and making so much money? He said, well, show me your sales system. And Howard was talking about this indirectly before. Show me your sales system and I'll critique it for you. I said, well, I don't have a sales system. He said, well, what do you do when you meet a prospect? Well, I just start talking as fast as I can. And I hope that the prospect will interrupt me and stop me from talking and buy something. And he said, how's that working for you? And I said, it's not working very well at all. Because they look at their watch and shake their watches. And I wouldn't mind if they looked at their watches when they shake their watches, bang the watch. That caused me to worry. And so I went from place to place, place to place. He said, you know, selling is more a rejection game than a sales game. So the more rejected you get, the more sales you'll make. So I used to run from place to place. It was a great exercise program. I'd run from place to place to give my presentation and run to the next place and the next place and the next place. And he said, no, he said, sales is a system. It's very much like a dish in the kitchen. It has a recipe. And if you follow the recipe, then you make sales. And if you don't, you don't. And that came as a shock to me. I said, well, what's your recipe? And he said, oh, it's very simple. He sort of used a funnel model. Is you ask general questions to make sure that this is a prospect, not just a suspect. And then you ask them questions about what they're doing, what they've done in the past. You ask them about their plans for the future relative to what we sell and so on. And then you ask them to buy. And I was just shocked. I still remember, to this day, I still remember sitting on a bench on the sidewalk across the street from our office next to a little park while he explained with a pen and paper his presentation. So instead of going out and talking 100 miles an hour, I went out and I asked questions. And I found that asking questions in selling and asking good questions is almost like a miracle. Because it takes you from a person feeling that you're their adversary and they have to defend themselves, it takes you to being their friend, trying to help them to improve their life or work. And Howard and I talked about this last night, is that what we do is we serve people. People who are successful in business are always looking for ways to help improve the lives of other people, to serve them, to make their lives better in a cost-effective way. And when I understood that, it was like a click. And I said, what else can I do? This is great stuff. I went out and people responded to me differently. He said, well, have you ever read any books on selling? And I said, are there books on selling? I mean, I love to read, but I had read mostly novels and some history books. He said, oh yeah, there's lots. So I went down to the bookstore, and I still remember the first book I ever bought. It was an international bestseller produced in England, and it was called How to Win Customers. Still remember that. And I got this book, and it was written by a man with 30 years experience, and he'd written it all down. How do you identify the proper customers? How do you identify your competition? How do you compare yourself with them? How do you answer objections? I never read a book before, and I was just felt like I died and gone to heaven. Now, about 25 years later, I was at a conference in Switzerland, way later in life, and I ran into the author of the book. And I still remember the book. I said, you're the first book I ever read. But after that, I read book after book after book. I read an hour to 2 hours every day. I took notes. And every time I learned something new, I'd go out and try it out. Now, this is really important because Howard talks about failure to execute. I didn't know, but I was doing things that changed my life forever. The first thing was I realized that sales was learnable. And that transformed my life. You could actually learn to do this really well and make a lot of money. And the more I learned and applied, the better results I got. The other thing I did, and it was probably because I was hungry, but every time I learned something new, I would run out and try it out immediately. I remember the first sales seminar. I used to listen to sales audio cassettes, the first ones that came out. I remember going to my first sales seminar all day long, taught by experts in our field. And as soon as I would learn something new, at the break, I would run out and run next door. It was downtown hotel convention center. I'd run next door, take an elevator to the top floor, and I began knocking on doors. See how many doors I could knock on during the break. And I'd knock all the way down to the bottom floor, and then I'd run back to the hotel and take my seat in the seminar. And for the rest of my life, whenever I learned something new, I tried it out immediately. And what I learned was, as Charlie Jones used to say, nothing works. He said, at least it doesn't work the first time. And maybe not the second or third or fourth time. And then I noticed that other people would try out things too occasionally, but then they would quit after the first time because it didn't work. And I realized that nothing works. I learned this long before I met Charlie Jones, decades in fact. So I would resolve I would try something 5 or 10 times before I would pass judgment on it, because nothing works. And sometimes we make the same example. Howard and I have something really good in common. When I was a young man, I really liked Caesar salad. And I was single, and so I would take girls out for dinner, and I would take them out to places that offer Caesar salad. And the person would come by the table at that time, and they would mix the salad by the table. And the salad would taste absolutely excellent. He'd mix the lettuce and the lemon and the Tabasco and the garlic and the anchovies and everything else, and wow. And I realized one day that this person standing next to the table is not a genius. He's just an ordinary person, but he makes beautiful Caesar salad. He must have something going for him. What was it? He had a recipe. Ta-da! So I went down to the store and I bought a cheap cookbook and got the recipe. And my mother had a cookbook and I borrowed her cookbook. And I began to practice making Caesar salad. And my first couple of times I did it wrong and I did it cheap and I used poor ingredients and the results were not very good. But I said, no, I know it's possible to make a great Caesar salad. Just like it's possible for you to start and build a business and become wealthy. It's doable because hundreds of thousands and millions of people have done it. And if they can do it, and some of these people are complete idiots. They can't find their bum with both hands. And if they have done that, I can do it as well. And it's really important that you understand that. If you have that complete conviction that what others have done, you can do as well, then nothing can stop you in the whole darn world. So I kept making this Caesar salad, and it got better and better and better. So eventually, I could invite girls over to my little apartment, and I could prepare dinner for them, which was cheap. It saved me a lot of money. So it actually helped my social life. Anyway, over the years, I got better and better and better. It turns out that Howard did the same thing. That Howard is also an expert at Caesar salad. And that Howard and I almost got into a cook-off last night because I told him that people consider my Caesar salad to be the best Caesar salad they've ever eaten in their life. And he said, well, people consider my Caesar salad to be the best they've ever. So here we are talking about Caesar salad. But I learned something about the Caesar salad, and I used to work that into some of my big seminars. I would talk about how this is the way life works. You get a recipe, you start to improve on the recipe and so on. And I had people write to me, I had people come up to me and say, you just changed my life. That story about the Caesar salad recipe changed my life. I'd never thought about that life is merely a combination of ingredients. And if it's not working, you have to change the ingredients. Now, I talked to Evan from Zig's organization a little earlier. One of the things that I fell into about 2 years ago was this whole concept of business model reinvention, business model innovation. And what we find is that every business that you have has a model. And the model is made up. I started to read the work that's been done on it, and they say that there's 9 parts of a business model. And I concluded that there were 12. And so I began working hour after hour, dozens of hours, then hundreds of hours, and I began studying all the work that's done at Harvard, which is quite exhaustive, to find out what exactly are the units, the parts of the business model, and how can you identify and analyze whether there's something wrong with them. And I came up with a very simple taste test, if you like, and it's simply this, is are your sales going up predictably and progressively? Your sales and your profits growing and growing each week, each month, each year. If your sales and profits are going up steadily in a steady line, that means that your business model is good, it's working. If for any reason your sales are not going up, if your sales are up and down, if your sales are unpredictable, if your sales are flat, if you're losing money, then what you have to do is you have to realize that something's wrong with your business model. It's just like, and women are far smarter at this than men, it's just like if you don't feel well, you've got a queasy stomach, your heart doesn't work that well, you have a headache and so on, it means that your physical model's not working. So what you have to do is you have to go to a professional, a doctor, in many cases, sometimes a dentist, sometimes a chiropractor. You have to go to someone who specializes in this and have them check it out. You don't just go along and suffer and say that, it's God's intention for me to suffer for the rest of my life. No, if something's wrong with your physical model. And in your life, I learned this from one of the most successful golf entrepreneur in America. His name when he was alive was Eli Callaway, and he established Callaway Golf. And a friend of mine worked with him and was the vice president of his business. And he said this is one of the greatest businessmen he ever met. But here's what he said. He said, Eli taught me this, and as soon as he taught me, I said, stop the clock, and I grabbed a pen and a piece of paper, and I wrote it down, and I put it on my desk, and I read it every day for a year. It was, to me, one of those great insights. He said that your business is designed today to get you exactly the results that you are getting today. If you're not happy with the results that you're getting from your business today, you have to change the design of your business model. I thought, geez, that's good. That is so insightful. And I found that if your life is properly designed, then you are happy, and you're fulfilled, and you're busy, and you love what you do, and you can't wait to get to work, and so on. But if it's not making you happy, like Howard, I wrote a book, by the way, called Full Engagement, which is a worldwide top seller, and it is on how to get your staff to be fully engaged in the work so that they love the business design. They can hardly wait to come to work, and they hate to go home. And so I spent a lot of time on this subject. And so it's the same thing with us. If there's any part of our life that's not working that well, then we have to do a stand back and look at it and say, what's broken here? It's like you're driving your car down the street. Many of you are old enough to remember when we had to repair our own cars. You're driving the car down the street, and the car's going, like this. Well, then you would assume, something may be wrong with the car. That's a good assumption to make. And it's the same thing with your body. If your body's not working well, if your business is not working well, then what you do is you stop and say, wait a minute, I need to stand back and open up the hood and put out all the pieces and take a look at it and see what's causing this problem. And as I was told Evan, I said that's not the subject of our seminar today. It's the seminar today is something else. But what I did is I wanted to introduce this concept of business model reinvention to you, and then I'll sort of loop back into it during our Total Business Mastery program. Because if you find just one piece that's out of order, like for example, when you make a Caesar salad, there are certain ingredients that we as Caesar salad experts know that you average people do not. And if you are missing one of those ingredients, or you have more or less of that ingredient than you should have, you can ruin the whole salad. And that's right. We know that because we put in too much garlic or too little, too much lemon or too little, too much vinegar. And you have to use tarragon vinegar. Should have given that away because if Harold doesn't know it, he could never beat me in a cook-off. But tarragon vinegar. But tarragon vinegar is a special ingredient. It's very hard to get. And that tarragon vinegar, if you have just one level tablespoon of tarragon vinegar in a bowl, a family-sized bowl of Caesar salad dressing, the Caesar salad will taste phenomenal. It'll have some kind of magic to it. But if you'd use no or half a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons, I used to think if 1 tablespoon made it taste better, than 2 tablespoons would make it taste twice as good. 2 tablespoons and it tastes awful. It's just like drinking raw vinegar. You go, you have to throw it away. So it's the same thing in your business. If you have one piece of your business that's out, I'll give you an example. When I used to start, when I was selling sales training, I would say, take my sales training program and you will double your sales and double your income within 30 days. And people would say, not interested, and slam, hang up the phone. And what I learned in advertising, marketing, is that more is less. If you make a claim that you can double people's sales, and they've been in business for years, and they've tried every single conceivable idea to make sales, and you tell them you can double your sales, they just hang up on you because they believe that you're exaggerating. You don't know what you're talking about. They know it's not possible. So I went back to saying that you could increase your sales by 30 to 50% over the next 6 to 12 months with my techniques. 30 to 60% over 6 to 12 months. They said, great, come on down, tell me about it. And I got appointment after appointment. I could just literally go through the yellow pages, cold call, and I would get 8 or 9 out of 10 appointments just by offering something less rather than something more. And you think about that, wow. So you see all of these offers that they send you, and these offers are preposterous. You have worked so hard, you know that it's not. So anyway, one small change in the ingredients. Now, how many business models are there? There are 55 business models that have been identified by the top universities in the world and that are taught in different schools. And those business models, the models that they use now in Europe and the top universities have 9 ingredients. Mine has 12, and mine is better. And I believe within a year or so, I will have a book on the market that will be the best book on business model reinvention ever written, because mine works. They leave out things, and the reason is, I studied these guys, is none of these guys have ever been in sales. None of these people who write on business model reinvention, the consultants and the professors and so on, they've never really actually run a practical business. They've gone from university to business degrees to talking about business model. And unless you've been out there, you remember that song, The Rock, where he says, we have shed the same mud and the same blood? It's a great one-liner. Well, unless you've actually been out there and made the sales and had to pay the bills and so on, then you don't know the things. And these professors are always telling you to do or not do things, and they don't know because they have never shed the same mud and the same blood.